Okay, so as stated, this is our last key knowledge dot point for agency and control. This key knowledge dot point is knowing how media is used by globalized media institutions, governments, and the individual. Soon you're going to discover exactly why I've made this the last thing that we do. But you will know when you get this type of question in a SAC or exam, because the key word in this one is used, right? That's kind of the word that we look out for, because of course we've already been talking about globalized media institutions. We've already been talking about government as far as regulation goes. We've already been talking about the individual. So keep your eye out for this type of question. All right. So diving straight in, no real waffle with this one. But the reason why this is the last thing that we are looking at is because we can manipulate what we've already learnt and done to suit this question, just with kind of an added sentence, right? So as far as how individuals use the media, we can say that individuals use the media to make profit. Individuals now in the contemporary landscape can make profit by producing individual content that attracts sponsorships, subscriptions, or payment by platforms. And we can dip into examples that we've already done. We can talk about the other Charlie Demilalelo, and how she rakes in money for her sponsored posts. We can, if you want to link this to the last thing that we did, about Brand Army and how individuals can make money by posting packages of photos. So we've done that. You can use that. A second way that individuals use the media in a contemporary landscape is to participate in trends, challenges, and prosumer online culture. And we've got examples of that. We can talk about the stitches or duets. Marcus DiPaolo, let me introduce you to my girlfriend, and how people want to be part of that meme, part of that online trend, by posting their own added version to it, right? By stitching and duetting those together. We can also note Carby Lame, who I know some of you didn't know, some of you do now, the most followed TikTok account. His rise to prominence was literally just putting together a stitch of somebody posted a video. He would then add his own one where he reattempts it and then just does the hand gesture thing, right? Or we could talk about the Friend Like Me challenge and how Disney have co-opted individuals to participate in that challenge, and individuals want to participate in it with the idea that they may go viral by TikTok pushing them out. Cool. So these are things that we're just tapping into. What we've already done, case studies we've already looked at, examples we've already discussed, and we're just manipulating them to suit this type of question. Cool? All right. So I've got even more because we've done heaps. Individuals use the media to engage in social activism, and they use the media to speak out against traditional gatekeepers in mainstream media. We have the example of the Mad Effing Witches there, right? This tends to be a case study or example that people are very comfortable with. So, imagine you get an exam or a SAC, and it doesn't give that sweet question of how do audiences influence the media, and you're like, oh man, I can't use my Mad Witches example. But then you get another question about how individuals or the media or institutions use the media, and we can use that here, right? Yeah. against Alan Jones. You might have to revisit notes or revisit the video. I'm not going to take up the video time going over it. The other way that individuals use the media is to pull pranks, and you could also lump this in with social activism. So now all of a sudden, if this becomes like if this is an extended response question and we need more than one example, this is a nice way to tie two things together. We could talk about Sean Morrow. So individuals use the media to pull pranks or engage in a form of social activism by impersonating brands or celebrities. Sean Morrow impersonating Eli Lilly to announce that insulin was free, hit them on the stock market, the price or the shares plummeted, etc. Right? So these are ways that individuals are using the media in a way that is much more complicated or robust or complex compared to individuals what use the media because we watch movies to entertain us, which is what the rest of the state write. Okay, so we can tap into what we already know, apply it just by including these sort of sentences, and all of a sudden we become an expert in these specific ways that individuals use the media. Cool? Great. So that was an easy one. The next one is a also easy but slightly less easy one. So this is now looking at how globalized media institutions use the media. Be aware of looking for that word globalized, because if it is globalized, then we have to talk about these international media giants. So, but again, we're tapping into things that we already know. And both of these things, that key word is profit, right? Media institutions use the media to make a profit, right? They're not in it for the joy of it, although you could argue that Elon Musk is not profiting from X, but instead is using it to upturn democracy. But we're not going to dive into that one. Instead, we'll say that media, these institutions use the media to profit from commodifying user data. It's a big word, commodifying. Essentially, that just means that they are taking user data, so information about us, and turning it into a commodity, which is just something that you can then on-sell. So they're using user data and turning it into something that is going to make them a profit to sell micro-targeted advertising to brands. And if we go back, we can talk about Google's data collection to use for promoting Hyundai's ads. So you might remember that was the one where user location data about whether people went to car dealerships then got fed into the Google ad machine. And so maybe if you went onto YouTube, which is another sister company of Google, you'd be served ads about car brands, right? So it fed into that. Another way that these media institutions use the media is to profit from audience participation by staging sponsored challenges associated with brands. Again, we can talk about Disney's Friend Like Me challenge that they put on TikTok. And then we also noted the 100-year Disney celebration, which I think was last year, where you could get coins. What could you get on that? I deleted TikTok by that point.
It's like a little icon.
Yeah. Cool. So we profit by audience participation, or at least get brand recognition through advertising to audiences and gaining their participation. Cool. So again, we're dipping into things that, we did do these ages ago. This is kind of some of the first ones we did. So the memory banks might need to be jogged, but that's how institutions use the media. It is to profit. So now we move on to government, and this is where I'm going to add some new content for you. Because we can talk about governments putting in place regulation. You could sort of talk about that. But I tend not to like that one as an example, because that's not governments using the media. That's governments trying to control the media or limit media influence, right? I'm going to give you two examples about governments actually using the media for something. So the first one is governments use the media to campaign to voters by jumping on trends and memifying their candidates to connect to younger voters who no longer consume traditional media. And the example I'm going to give is one from last year, around this time last year, where in the US presidential election, I don't know if you remember, but it was Joe Biden and Donald Trump going against each other until it looked like Joe Biden was going to lose by a significant margin, and he could barely participate in the debates. He was just looking like a sad old man. And so he stepped back, and Kamala Harris stepped in. And the moment she stepped in, there was a lot of buzz around young Americans promoting her. And this is kind of an example. So let's just play the short and then we can get in. Oh. Hang on. Bear with me. Sorry. Sync faster. Okay. Let's try this again.
Have you been wondering what all these bright green memes are all about? Let this millennial help you out. So this all started on Sunday with British pop star Charlie XCX tweeting "Kamala is brat," referring to her latest album. And if you're not up to speed, the singer says a brat is just a girl who's a little messy and likes to party and maybe says dumb things sometimes. And the VP and her campaign team responded by owning this title, even using the album cover's bright church's green color on X. The moment turned into a meme, and the whole thing sort of caught fire online, with TikTok edits combining I'm So Julia from the Brat album and Harris's coconut tree speech, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?" getting millions of views. The tag Kamala Harris is even trending on TikTok right now with over 100 million views in just the last week. This meme became Harris's official launch as the likely Democratic nominee, advertising her as Gen Z's Brat Summer icon.
All right. So I'm going to give you the headline of the second reason, and then we'll dive into both and give you SAC and exam-worthy language. So the other way that the media is used by governments is to promote their political agenda while minimising scrutiny from opposition and media commentators. And soon I will give you an example of that. This one from close to home. And the reason why I'm giving you two things for this is because the Brat Summer one's an easy one to remember. But I want to prep you for if a question asks about Australian media government. Yes?
Could you talk about the Ingrid and Macca's incident?
Yeah, you possibly could. But I would say that that's not necessarily the government using it. That was more, I don't think the Labor Party actually did anything with that. I think they just let it run its course on social media. But yes, that is an example of the changing media landscape and how governments are seen in it. All right, so let's get back to our Brat Summer. And so I think that first video did really give a good summary of the case. So I'm not going to play this one, but it will be there. I'll pop it up on the portal in case you want another summary. But I think that 1 minute summary was a good one. So let me go into the... So that was a good, or that was one of the examples of the remixing that happened. But let's move on to give you the facts of this case study. So in August 2024, I told you it was about a year ago, US presidential nominee Kamala Harris embraced social media trends and viral memes to engage with young voters. On the night that President Biden pulled out of the presidential race and endorsed Harris, British pop star, Your Girl and Mine, the real other Charlie XCX. You got to take XCX over D'Amelio any day, and over Dyring. That is the rank of the Charlies. So she posted on her social accounts, Kamala, capital IS, is brat. This connected Harris to the pop culture trend and the idea of being brat. Now, remember, this was a year ago, right? I know that now, while we now see that, maybe with a tinge of cringe, at the time, the brat summer was the biggest, coolest thing that was happening. And so attaching Kamala Harris to that at the time was a big deal. And so, as always, the light grey is for your context, not necessarily something that we put in a SAC exam. So brat meaning someone who may not be polished or always appropriate and was brave at speaking out. All right. Moving ahead, I will put these up in the portal. Okay, so after Charlie XCX posted that, the Harris campaign jumped on this viral moment, changing the official Harris campaign account to match the neon olive green, or chartreuse if you can spell it, neon olive green color and Arial font from Charlie XCX's album. Right, so they've really tried to rebrand as being brat. This even in itself went viral, and Harris's supporters made edits of her previous coconut tree speech, cutting it together with XCX's music to amplify the meme. And if you wanted to end up being tricky with this, you could almost point to this as being another example of spreadable media theory. The fact that individuals, or an individual like Charlie XCX posted something, and then other people jump on that trend and then spread it out further. We could use this as an example of it. Yeah. But that's we're trying to save you time on writing. And better than, what is it? Her actual surname even.
That's just what she's known as.
Yeah.
She's married now.
Is she?
Hello?
Who did she marry?
She got married.
She married.
For the sake of the recording, who did she marry?
Oh, let me get it up.
Yeah, cool.
But she was wearing a little.
George then.
Oh, she looks so good.
Her full name is Charlotte Emma Aitchison.
No, I would change it to XEX myself. All right, next one. Okay.
She married George Daniel.
So, oh, okay, cool. All right, so this initial memification of Harris worked to attract a younger audience of voters as the official Harris account doubled its followers overnight. And you can see on the right, on TikTok, the views of official campaign videos. So these are videos posted by the official campaign accounts. So this is Kamala Harris's one that changed to the neon green. We went from these weeks both being quite low engagement, okay? And so these numbers here on the right, these are millions of views, okay? And over here, these are the weeks. So you can see from when Kamala Harris was announced as replacing Biden. So it's not like Biden's views were doing great beforehand. It's not like they crossed over and his went down when he withdrew and hers went up. No, his were always lower than hers. But as soon as Kamala is brat, we've gone from under 10 million campaign video views to over 60 million. Okay, so that is a huge jump. Also useful to put some additional research into this. And we can say that this was a conscious effort from the Harris campaign to connect to Gen Z voters. That's you guys. But obviously not you guys because you're not American, but you get the idea. As Pew Research noted that nearly half of TikTok users in the US between 18 to 29, so that young group of voters, so you could say sort of, voters in their first decade of voting, of being able to vote. So half of those TikTok users in the US between the ages of 18 to 29 say they use the social media platform to keep up with politics. So that's a radical change from what we see as traditional news media. Rachel.
Is that kind of like what Abby Chatfield, like that kind of thing, like her reporting on the...
Yes, absolutely. So I was tempted to do Abby Chatfield for this, but I just like Charlie XCX much more. And it's an easy one to remember. It's easy to remember Coconut Tree. So yes, taking this as an example, you could also do Donald Trump appearing on podcasts. So he was, Joe Rogan. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
He's on the
Theo Von. He was on the former WWE wrestler The Undertaker's podcast. And so these are governments seeing these different ways to reach audiences, because audiences now aren't all reading newspapers or listening to talkback news radio, right? You've got to get them through a different way. Yeah.
I'm sure this is like ironic, but I remember this time last year seeing on TikTok boys that were like, or young men that were like, it was their first time voting and they were asked who they were voting for. They would say Trump because they had a crush on his granddaughter Kai. So that was the reason they wanted to, because they didn't know any better.
Yep, okay.
So that was the reason, because of his granddaughter Kai.
Yep. I would say that there probably is a history of people voting for people for crazy reasons. But yes, that's...
And that's also because she'd gone viral on TikTok.
Okay.
Within like the 2 weeks prior or something, like she'd joined TikTok and gone viral pretty much straight away.
Yeah, right. Whose daughter is she?
I'm not
One of them.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, finishing this case study. So, the Harris campaign continued to make an effort to connect to this younger demographic by inviting social media content creators to their national rally. This has been something that has continued. We have kind of mentioned this already, that in the White House now, the press gallery is no longer just made up of the big news networks, that there is now spot for YouTubers, podcasters, TikTokers, and now you can argue that they tend all to be pro-Trump TikTokers, YouTubers, etc. But the official policy from the White House is, no, this is where people get their news now. We can't just talk to newspapers or newspaper journalists. We've got to talk to other people as well. And this was a real change that we saw from this sort of campaign. In this case, we can see that governments use social media in the contemporary landscape to connect to audiences who no longer consume media from traditional sources. And that's exactly what we were just saying about Trump on Joe Rogan and Theo Von, Albanese on Abby Chatfield's podcast, the Batuta Advocate podcast as well had their fair share of politicians in. I don't know if Albanese went on that. Dutton went on a few as well. So, we are seeing these political leaders and government representatives going to non-traditional media sources in order to campaign. Okay. Now, the second example, which is kind of this is a bit of an adaptation from it, right? This is really kind of segueing nicely from what we were saying about they were using it to campaign. Now they're using the media to promote their political agenda. That's not new. That's always happened. But what is changing is the way in which the government is dictating what gets reported. So governments use the media now to promote their political agenda. That's always been the case, while minimising scrutiny from opposition and media commentators. And the example or case study that we're going to look at here is Anthony Albanese's government putting embargoes on their political announcements. We'll explain what that means in a sec. So I'm going to show you the Media Watch report first, and then we can note this stuff, okay? This is literally, Jesse saw me typing this up earlier today. This is news from last night, right? This is fresh stuff. Okay, here we go.
In its world-first attempt to block kids from social media.
Technology designed to check the age of social media users is effective. A government-backed trial has concluded.
The report found that age assurance for social media use in Australia can be done privately, efficiently and effectively.
The nation's newspapers earnestly reporting a much-anticipated government-backed review of the technology that might be used to stop children logging into those nefarious social media platforms. With good news all round.
Communications Minister Annika Wells said,
The Albanese government is on the side of families.
The report did identify important caveats, which several reporters were careful to include, like the potential for privacy breaches. But doesn't so complex a review into so complex a policy require the analysis of independent experts? Strangely, there was none in any of these stories. It was a similar case back in September 2024 when the Albanese government first revealed its plan to legislate a social media ban.
The Prime Minister on Tuesday will commit to introducing world-leading legislation to protect children from digital harm.
Yet again, in these stories, there was no quoting of dissenting voices, no quoting of interest groups, and no quoting of technical experts. And why might that be? Maybe because the formidable parliamentary press gallery was told it wasn't permitted to do so. And from whom did these marching orders come? Would you believe it? The government itself.
Hi everyone. Tomorrow the Prime Minister will announce the Albanese government will introduce legislation this term to enforce a minimum age for access to social media.
Strictly embargoed until 10:30 p.m. No third-party comment.
So press releases are not new. They've always happened, right? So the journalists get informed early about what the government is going to announce so that the newspapers and TV networks can go, oh, okay, we need a photographer there, we need to, right? What is happening increasingly are these sentences to say that the information is embargoed, which means you can't report on this until 10:30 p.m. and you can't seek comment from somebody other than the government, okay? That's the new bit that's increasing, and so we'll see now why this is a bit of a problem.
Which means no one else is to be quoted. Fast forward 11 months when the PM decided YouTube deserved to be banned too, another friendly missive arrived in press gallery mailboxes from on high.
Under embargo, with no third party or opposition comment until 10:30 p.m.
Strictly, no third party or opposition comment.
That's right, no comments except for those from Dear Leader and his commissar. Then, 8 days ago, another Labor spinner came along to feed the chooks.
The trial report reveals age assurance is practical and achievable.
Strictly embargoed with no third-party contact.
This bizarre arrangement, journalists agreeing to restrict their reporting in return for a so-called drop, dates back decades. Consecutive governments seeking to exploit their monopoly on information to further their own agenda, hoping their unfiltered message will be reprinted and then picked up by radio and TV. And as a shrinking press gallery has shed its policy specialists and the news cycle grown more frenetic, so the power imbalance has grown. But frustrated journos tell us it's only been in the past year that spinners feel so emboldened as to routinely put the no third-party diktat in writing. And it's not confined to Labor. Here's a drop from the Dutton campaign back in April.
Strictly embargoed with no third-party comments.
In just that month, with the election bearing down, the drops from both sides turned into a rushing river of handouts about the Port of Darwin, home batteries, community language schools, penalty rates, and domestic violence, all of which prohibited too much journalism from pesky reporters. There are plenty of real grenades set off by the Canberra Press Gallery and occasions on which the ban is ignored or even called out, like this blue ribbon effort by the Australian Financial Review, which alerted readers to the ruse.
The announcement prohibited journalists from contacting the opposition or third parties ahead of its release.
But in no other field of serious journalism would such an instruction be deemed tolerable. Even the doyen of the dark arts of media management, Sue Cato, despaired.
If you tried that outside the Canberra bubble, you could expect journos to tell you to self-procreate. My first response is, if you want to dictate a story, buy an ad.
Several big hitters in the Canberra Press Gallery have told us it's time for the convention to cease, including Peter Harcher, who said ministers making such demands
are conspiring to degrade news and journalism. They should stop. If they don't, reporters should ignore this unethical constraint and remember that their main responsibility is to their readers, viewers and listeners, not their sources.
President of the Press Gallery, the ABC's Jane Norman, said that no third-party comment demand by politicians and interest groups is an attempt to
control their media coverage, to shape or frame the first take of a story without the possibility of experts or critics weighing in.
She said the restriction creates a dilemma for the media in
having to decide whether the public interest in an embargo drop outweighs the necessity, at least in the first instance, to include other perspectives.
The Australian Financial Review's political editor, Phil Curry, says he writes context and the reaction he anticipates to an announcement into his stories as a kind of workaround, and that to not report these drops at all would often be a disservice to his readers.
Clearly, we would all prefer if no such demands were placed on drops, but that's the prerogative of the dropper. At the end of the day, we're not forced to write it.
This April drop, publicising a mental health program, resulted in news stories arrayed across the ABC, Nine and News Corp. But hold on, what's this? Third-party comments?
Mental Health Australia Chief Executive Carolyn Nikolowski described it as a
landmark investment that recognises the challenges the community is facing.
Former Australian of the Year Patrick McGorry said,
All Australians will deeply appreciate this groundbreaking commitment.
No, don't get up. These were only simulacra of the real thing, because those quotes were not the product of actual phone calls by reporters, but were of course supplied by the generous souls who staff Albo's office. But don't think for a minute anyone else was allowed to be interviewed.
So the idea that the government is essentially writing its own articles by giving quotes from pre-approved people by the government means that you don't get an alternative perspective. You don't get somebody questioning the government. You just get the fluffy people that are saying, "Oh, this is a really great policy." So let's add some of this to our actual notes here. So the summary of the case study is: in September 2025, literally yesterday, the ABC's Media Watch reported on the worrying trend in Canberra's parliamentary press gallery. For our context, you don't need to tell a media teacher this, but the press gallery, it's the name given to the collection of journalists from Australia's news media who are assigned to reporting federal government news. And they're the ones who all stand around when there's a press conference. They're the ones who follow the politicians on their planes. They tend to be assigned to either Albanese himself or just the government in general. The Media Watch noted an increase in the number of press release drops, that's their language, from the government to the press gallery, featuring a, quote, strict embargo. Okay. So one specific example noted by Media Watch was from the government's 2024 announcement. You can put the comment in government, or the apostrophe, I should say. The 2024 announcement of the planned introduction of the under 16 social media ban, one that we all know well. The embargo dictated to journalists the time that the media can report the news, and this is the more important one, that no third party or opposition comment can be sought by the media until after that time. Okay, so just the nuance here is that they're not telling them that they can never seek comment from a third party or the opposition. But what they're saying is you can choose at 10:30 to report this and be one of the first to drop this news, or you can wait until 10:30 and then start making the calls and contacting people about this news in order to get different perspectives into your article. It just might mean that your article is much later than your competitors. So it's putting these journalists in a difficult position. All right. So by enforcing this embargo on press releases, take the whole box. The government benefits because they get their unfiltered message reprinted and reported by the news media without immediate scrutiny or questioning. Right, and especially if they have pre-approved quotes in there and that's what gets reported, then it becomes a very positive article in the government's favour, right? So this places pressure on the media as they are forced to choose between informing its audience of news in a timely manner or produce balanced reporting without enforced bias. And so the journalist has to choose, do I inform my audience at the right time, or do I inform my audience of the full picture by getting alternative opinions? Now, most of them choose to do it at that time. And there's other reasons for it. It's in the journalist's favour to, you end up getting 2 articles out of it because you get the first one with the announcement and then the next day you publish another one where then you've got people's alternative opinions. But if the government is announcing something that has flaws and you can't report that from the start, that's not in the public interest. That's not in your audience's interest. And for a government to be demanding that in what we think is a pretty free country with free press, it's not a good thing. So journalists and media commentators denounce the increase in this practice, likening it to the government getting a free advertisement for their policies. And as was reported, it's not new for politicians to say to journalists, hey, I've got a scoop for you. If you publish this with in the favourable light, I'll give you all the information. And journalists going, oh yeah, let's make this deal. That's always happened. What's new now is the fact that it is in writing like it's official policy rather than like handshake deals. Almost there. I think we've got one slide.
I mean, if you worked as a journalist, what would you do?
I would publish the article at the time and then publish another one later criticising it. The news cycle now is so short that if you're not first, you may as well not publish it, right? If you know that all your competitors are announcing that news at 10:30, and you can't pick up so by the time you pick up the phone to get opinions, it's not until the next day. And if you do that on everything, you're not news anymore, right? But maybe there should be publishers that literally do that. I mean, we used to have, and we still do, have like weekly papers that would publish a more insightful, detailed, in-depth reporting because they've got that extra time. That still does occur, but nowadays, as we just saw, more and more people are getting their news from social media. You've got to be fast. But I can understand why this leads us to the next bit. While journalists are now pushing back, right, to saying, well, give us the embargo, we can't report this until 10:30, but give us that time to make some phone calls and get an alternative voice. And I think that there are some things that the government probably doesn't want people contact, because as soon as you call up a third party, you call, let's say, an expert professor at a university, well, then you're telling them that the government's about to announce the social media ban, and then they might let that news slip, right? So I get why in some cases, but for a social media ban, that's not such an important thing. If it's we're announcing a military strike on someone, well, okay, we don't want that to slip out early. But I don't think that the government would be putting a press release before something like that. But journalists have reacted negatively to this, where probably the best one to quote is Jane Norman, the Federal Parliamentary Press Gallery president, commented that this was the government's attempt to control their media coverage, to shape or frame the first take of a story without the possibility of experts or critics weighing in. I like that quote because it sums up this whole issue, and I like it because what is the name of this entire area of study?
Agency control.
And here is a clear example and a quote about a government attempting to control the media. And this brings us to the conclusion of all media content for Unit 3 and 4. Congratulations for getting this far. Bye!